Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and just zoom out, do shift middle mouse button to pan this down, and do Alt H to bring the child object back. I'm going to actually zoom in a little bit more over here. Now go ahead and click on this object, which is really emulating the axis. Go ahead and remove the copy rotation constraint and do Alt R to reset the rotation on it. Click on this one, remove this copy rotation constraint, do Alt R to reset the rotation. Click on this object, do Alt R to reset the rotation. Click on this object and do Alt R to reset the rotation. Now over here, I want you to switch this to world space. So here right now, we're doing a copy rotation on this object. So when we press the R key to rotate this object, you will see that wherever the parent goes, the child will follow. Now it's very easy to create a cyclic relationship with copy rotations when you are trying to understand this concept over here. So to demonstrate this, what I want you to do is do Alt R to reset the rotation on this. Now you can see here is that we of course know that we cannot tell this object to copy the rotation values of its child. It's because when the parent object rotates, the child was going to rotate anyways. And in the same way, we cannot tell this object to copy the rotation values of this object and then tell this object to copy the rotation values of this object. That's not going to work, right? Because when the child rotates, this object is going to rotate, but in turn it was going to rotate this object, and this object was going to rotate the child. So here you're just going to get stuck in some sort of loop, right? So that's not going to work. So what we have to do is click on this object and turn off the copy rotation constraint. Now you will notice that although we have turned this off, when we click on this object and press the R key, it still doesn't work. Now, I'm not sure what the reasoning behind this is. It could be to protect you from cyclic relationships, but if we want this to work at all, we actually have to go to the parent object of this object and go ahead and completely remove the copy rotation. So you should not see a blue line to this object. Now when we click on this object and press the R key, you will see that it works. So just keep that concept in mind. So here I'm just going to go under File and do Save. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go ahead and first look at this object. So here what we're doing is telling this object to evaluate this object in world space. Now, like before, this object only knows how to exist in world space, just like this object. And this object only knows how to operate in local space, right? So this object has no idea what this object is talking about. It will always operate in local space. Only with the copy rotation constraint, Blender is going to let this object look at this object in world or local space. Okay, so first we're going to keep both of these set as world space. Now over here, when we press the R key to rotate this object and press the R key, press the Y key to rotate on its global Y, you can see that this object is of course going to rotate along its global Y, right? That's the idea here, because we're looking at this object in world space. Now if you want to get a better understanding of this, what you can do is simply click on, let's say, this object, do Shift D to duplicate it, and press the G key to move it over here. Click on this object, do Shift S, do cursor to select it. Now click on this object and actually remove the parent-child relationship. Now do Shift S and do selection to cursor. Do Alt R to reset its rotation, and press the S key to scale this a bit. Okay, so here when we look at this object, go to the Constraints tab. When we're saying that we want to look at this object using world space, meaning use the global coordinate system, you can see that here we're just creating a marker to see how this object is being looked at by this object. So when we press the R key, press the Y key, you can see that how this is working, right? It's the same concept being translated over here. So if we press the R key, press the Y key to rotate on Y, this of course is going to rotate on Y. Same thing with X. So that's pretty straightforward. Now here we're going to say that, okay, now look at this object in a local space. So how is this going to work? Go ahead and click this and press the H key to just hide that, okay? Now, the way this is going to work is that when we click on this object, do Alt-R to reset the rotation, and actually do Alt-G, okay? I'm going to just, we can actually click on this object, press the shape key down, click on this one, do G, and move it a little closer over here to understand this concept, okay? So now, when we click on this object over here, I'm going to actually press the G key to move this, click over here, and press the S key to scale this a bit so we can see the difference, okay? So this is its axis over here. I'm going to click this to Alt-G. So here you can see that when we press the R key to rotate this object in local space, it's showing you that it's moving away, its offset, right, from its original starting rotation. So that information is also going to appear over here. You can see that we're evaluating in world space. So when we click on this object, press the R key, press the Y key 2 times, again, it's just going to rotate around the Y axis. This object is going to do the same thing. Now the question is that how do we rotate around the Y-axis? Right, it's starting a rotation in its local space. Well, there's really no easy way to do this other than going over here and making sure that this is set on local, and we click this. Now we have to go to the transform orientation and click on the plus sign. Now go over here. So here we're going to do a plane 2 and actually come in over here and do child local, enter. Okay, now when we click on this object, and when we have this set to child local, when we press the R key, press the Y key, this is global. When we press it again, now it's local. So you see that now when we rotate this object around its starting rotation on its Y, it's also going to appear over here, okay? So that's how this concept works. It's actually a pretty straightforward idea over here. So what happens, now we've already seen how it works in world space, right? What happens when we switch this to local space, okay? So go ahead and switch this. Now again, when we do local space, right, this object's axis is really just going to align itself to this one. That's what we're really saying over here. So here, go ahead and move over here. What I want you to see first is that the rotation value is at 0. So when we do local space, we are not going to rotate its axis to attach itself over here, because we already understand that this object is saying it has never moved away from its Y. Remember, it's stuck like glue to it. That's another way to understand it, right? So over here, when we click on this, press the R key to rotate, you'll see that this object, it's being evaluated in local space, is still going to rotate, okay? Because we're looking at this in local space, and that information indeed is coming in. So over here, when we click on this, press the R key, press the Y key to rotate, you'll see that it still rotates around its Y-axis, right? Because we haven't even rotated this. So when we press the R key to rotate, right, if we rotate this, we are actually going to be rotating the Y-axis. There's no other way out of this, right? So what we have to do is do copy rotation and actually copy the rotation of this object over here. Now, what you can do is go ahead and do copy rotation and now get the rotation value of this object, and again do the same thing, invert, and over here we're going to invert all of these, and of course we have to click on offset. Now over here, we're going to say that, okay, to bring the local rotation, because this object only knows how to operate in local space to begin with, right? So now when we click on this object and press the R key, here you can see that when we are rotating, we're changing its value because the Y axis is going to be stuck to this axis anyways, right? When we rotate this object, let's do like this. Now when we click on this object, press the R key, press the Y key 2 times. If we rotate around the Y, you'll see that that object is now going to rotate around its Y. Okay? Over here. That's what a local space is going to do in this case, right? Okay, so we've seen local space over here now, and now if we switch this to world space, right? Here we're going to go ahead and click on this object, do Alt R to reset the rotation. Now I'm gonna do actually just press the G key to move this object over here. Do Alt H to bring that axis back. Click on this object, do Shift S and do cursor to select it. Click on this one, do Shift S and do select and do cursor. And go ahead and click this and just hide it so it doesn't come in our way, because we're evaluating this now in world space. So of course it's going to use the global Y axis over here. Now let's go ahead and click on this one. Here we're seeing a local space. I'm going to go ahead and click on both of these and press the G key and move it out of the way over here so it makes a bit more sense. Okay. So now when we click on this object, we're going to do Alt R to reset its rotation. Okay. So now we're evaluating this in local space. Remember, if this is 0 over here, this is what it actually looks like. The axis is stuck to it, right? Over here. But in reality, we would have to click this and actually turn off the rotation. Let's just completely turn it off so you can see first what's going on. So over here, when we click on this, here we're seeing world space. So world space means you look at this object with this coordinate system. So again, when we press the R key, that will move, and when we press the R key, press the Y key to rotate around Y, and that will also rotate around Y. Now again, we're still looking at this object in local space. So how should this behave when we press the R key? Of course, it's going to behave the same way. It has to rotate. So I'm going to turn this on, and over here we have to look at that in world space. Press the R key. You'll see that now when we rotate this, click over here, press the R key, press the Y key, right? It will rotate around Y. Same thing for X. Here I'm just showing you how to understand some of these concepts over here, right? So this should make sense to you. So we've looked at world space, local space, local, world, and local. Okay, so that's how this concept is going to work. So here I'm just going to simply reload the file, and we're going to now take a look at a much more trickier thing to understand that has to do with working with the parent itself. So go ahead and just do the same thing. Go ahead and click this and click on this and actually just remove this. And here we're just going to delete that B, just check all of these. There should be no constraints on any of these. Okay. Now let's do file and save, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.